Hello and welcome to Why We Lead, educating today's warfighters to be modern and effective military leaders.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in today. My name is Chris Little, and I'm here with Travis Halleman, also known as Pred. So thanks for being on today. Sure appreciate it. He's joining us all the way from Germany. Met him about 3-ish years ago when I was going through the UFT board for getting RPA, undergraduate flying training, and kind of stayed in touch ever since, and it's been great. Just wanted to bring you on here to talk to you a little bit today. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got to where you were today.
Yeah, so where can I begin? So I've been in the, well, actually first, thank you, Chris, for having me on. That's what they usually do in all the talk shows. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate your time. And by the way, being from Japan can't be bad either, or from the Pacific. But I've go by Prez, my call sign. I've been in for about 16 years. My 16-year mark is in June. I came in 2004, the post 9/11 boom, when all of us were, wanting to do something with our lives. I was in university at the time, and I was in graduate school working on my thesis in engineering. I was a broke college kid, decided, hey, I can't afford to go anywhere on spring break. So I'll just sit here and work on my thesis. And strangely enough, that week of spring break was the week we walked into Iraq. And I remember listening to AM radio in Wyoming. And that morning it was snowing and it was a miserable day. And I stopped and asked myself, hey, I'm 24 and I haven't done anything with my life. I should probably do something. So that's kind of why I decided to join the military. And when I joined, I actually wanted to, I called the Guard first. I was just going to join that C-130 Guard unit there in Cheyenne. And then they were like, oh, no. You need to call active. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that's kind of where it started. Let's see, tell you about myself. 16 years, joined the military, 2004. Was a bioenvironmental engineer my first 4 years. That's a 43 Echo. So I did occupational health and safety for 4 years. I was stationed at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. Did my first tech school back in the day in 2005, the summer of 05, down in San Antonio. That was, we graduated and then Hurricane Katrina hit. Went back to North Dakota. I was going to get out in 2008. And then, no kidding, one of my students, I teach part-time. One of my students said, hey, pulled me aside at the end of class and said, hey, Travis, are you going to apply to pilot training again? I was like, no, man, I got smoked the previous year. I think I'm done. I'm going to get out. It's time to make some money. And he goes, well, why don't you try one more time? Maybe it's your chance or something. So put something together, had a group commander at the time who was amazing, who's still a friend of mine, a retired 2-star. We talk all the time. And helped me get across the line, and then picked up for nav training. Went to Randolph, the old Randolph days. Got down to drop week, and then decided I had a choice. First, I went the EDUB route back in the old days when you could pick which one you wanted.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh crap, I'm either gonna get buffs or I'm gonna get EC-130s. And I was like, oh crap. Well, I don't want to deploy every 90 days for 90 days. So, well, at least with the buff, I know what I'm getting. Because I had friends in Minot who were flyers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yeah, I'll go the buff route. And I was like, well, if I'm going to go buffs, I'm going back to Minot. They're sure as hell, I'm not staying in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. So took one for the team for my class, picked buffs. When I showed up in Shreveport for initial qual, day one, I was like, hey, guys, I'm going to let y'all know. I'll be the sacrificial lamb in this class who's willing to go to Minot. And then they raised me above their shoulders and was like, Fred, you are my hero. And then I went back to Minot. Was there from 2010 to 2015. I did it feels like I did everything while I was there. I did my operational time. And then because I was late rated, I got pushed over I was forced to grow up a lot faster. So I got pushed over the OSS. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. One of the topics I think is cool. I kind of found my niche while I was in the OSS. And then from there, I did a stint in the EIG's office. And then got picked up the summer of 15, went to AFPC, Air Force Personnel Center. Because again, no one volunteered for the job. No one, the detailer is one of those jobs that There's so many hidden secrets. Like I've got the tattoo. I can tell you all like where the dead bodies are and the secret handshake. But there's the detailer picks their own person replacement. They don't call the 06s and their group commanders and wing commander and say, "Hey guys, I'm leaving. I'm looking for a replacement." No, day one, you start doing your homework and find the right person. So went down to San Antonio again. I will say it was probably the busiest and most stressful time of my life, hands down. The 2 years I was there, loved it, but absolutely hated it some days. It was a great time. There's so many secrets I could tell you guys, but it's fascinating. Did my time, loved it. I managed 1,700 bomber air crew.
Wow.
All by myself. The average assignment officer handles non-rated handles about 400 people.
It's pretty intense.
I did 1,700. Yeah, intense is a good word to describe that. The RC-135 world had at the time one assignment officer, and I think she had, what was it, around 2,000. So
wow. Yeah, they have two now, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, because that was one thing we told her. It was like, you got to find a second person. So that's good. That worked out. And they also got a second bomber person, so that was good. And then they give you additional duties. So I was the deputy branch chief because I had the most experience. And then I also ran the UFT boards, which we'll come back to and talk, etc. And then in 2017, I just had a day, literally, I remember this was February, March of 17. And I remember coming to work and I remember just sitting there looking at my monitor and going, and I'll give you the PG rated version. I looked at my monitor and said, it's time to get out of here. I literally, just like 12 o'clock high, there was something like clicked, like I couldn't do it anymore. And then that's when I was like, well, I don't want to be a commander anymore. I don't want to do any of this. I'm tired of playing these games. I'm tired of making everyone else happy. I want to do what's going to make me happy. So I went down the laundry list. And when you leave AFPC, you kind of get to choose what you want to do. It's kind of like going into a candy store, right? Imagine this big candy store, and you can choose whatever you want. You get one purchase. Do you want Bazooka Joe bubblegum, or do you want like some Lindt chocolate, like their top of the line Swiss chocolate? And yeah, there are certain people who go, yeah, I'll take a Twix bar. That sounds good. And then you go, Twix? Why are you taking Twix? I'd want Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
But that's when I went down the list and I said, I've never been to Europe. My husband, we've talked about settling here in Europe, and I said, that's it. If we're going to do it, let's do it. So took an assignment, another desk job, and for the last 2 years, I've been here at headquarters USUCOM as a nuclear policy officer, and absolutely love the job. This has been my bread and butter.
That is awesome.
So I've absolutely enjoyed it. So I guess, yeah, that's minus my call sign story. I guess I could sum up my entire career. I've had a pretty good, I heard my group commander at the time when I pinned on Major said that he said, quote, Pred, you're like a Renaissance man. What haven't you done? So
I mean, it sounds like you've been through a lot of stuff. And I'm sure AFPC kind of opened your aperture a lot to the rest of the Air Force, particularly because literally the cubicle next to you is the RC-135, EC-130 kind of person, or the helicopter people, or fighter porch people, you know, stuff like that. So you get all that. And do you think that helped you kind of grow a little bit as a leader, or?
Better believe it. I think to throw on what you said, or to add on to what you said, not only is who I used to stare at every day, the helo rescue guy who we'd sit there and joke, no kidding, right behind me and across the, like, because it's all just one big bay, if you will. Right across the way were the 17Ds, the cyber dudes, who I used to give so much shit to. Oh, oops, sorry. Give so much crap to. Because they was like, hey, someone's nerdier than me, and I'm an EDUB, electronic warfare guy. So, but yeah, it does. It's, number one, I think with my background, it was good because I could walk everywhere and I knew what their job was. As a bio officer, you knew you have to go out to these work areas and talk to people. You have to build those interpersonal skills. So you have to flip that switch. Even if you have a bad day, you have to smile and walk out there and be like, hey guys, I need you to wear your respirators because I don't want you to have cancer in 10 years. And then that kind of helps. Like, so when I was at AFPC and the days were stressful or it was like, I'm just not feeling it. I mean, I would literally, I had a guy call one time at AFPC who I flew with, who was a boss of mine, who calmed me down one day. He called me, said, hey, my daughter, we are in Denver. The hospitals in Albuquerque can't help us. I need help, Fred. No one will help me. I said, okay, give me like 2 hours. Hung up the phone. I ran the opposite side of the building to talk to the, what's it called? The expedition, no, the people with medical needs to find out how we can get them out of there. And then I had to walk over like to one of the other buildings. And then we had orders in his hand within, I think it was like 48 hours, 72 hours.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that job also taught me a lot about what to do and what not to do. It's, for the lack of a better term, I can honestly say that when you have to do human resource management, and if you do it correctly, it literally is your command tour. There is no reason why. Another reason why I walked out of there knowing that, one, I have a job lined up if I want when I get out in human resource management. Number two, I've already had my junk kicked in for 2 years. The equivalent, but I mean, the only positive thing is I never had to sign any inventory saying I owned anything, so that was even better. I just got
that's
everything
pretty
else.
cool, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, your leadership skills, especially the personal component, pays huge dividends. I would argue.
Do you think you were able to? I'm writing an article in a little bit, but Colin Powell in one of his YouTube videos, he's like, trust is one of the most important things that you can kind of encompass as a leader, and for other people to trust you. I would imagine in that position, a lot of people had to trust you, especially kind of as that liaison. Is that true or?
100% true. If the assignment guy is not trusted, people will not listen to you, and that includes anywhere, anything. Yeah. I mean, I'll use that. Because I'm going to use Star Trek references because I'm a nerd. There's that TNG episode where Counselor Troy tells Geordi to go into her leadership test is killing one of the crew, right? And the person has to trust what she's saying. It's the same thing there. Like, and I learned that real quick. Like, my predecessor had no trust. No one trusted him. And then when I walked in, day one when I walked in, I had a list of like, these are my strategic goals for the next 2 years. And then I would go back to that list, no kidding, every month and see how I'm doing. And I would modify and adjust it from there. So to me, I thought about was like, okay, well, if I need trust will get me across the line, because again, who wants to go to Minot? No, I used to say this over and over again. No one wants to go to Minot. So you have to, if you're going to tell someone, sorry, dude, I get it. Your wife's not going to have a job, or your husband aren't going to have jobs. I need you to go to Minot. Well, Pred, I don't know. Come on. Like, listen, if you go there, I will ensure that you are paid back on the back end. All right. And so I went above and beyond. It from everything from throwing myself under the bus, humor, whatever it took. Great example. Like when you called asking for UFT questions, to me, customer service is the #1 priority at AFPC. And it would blow my mind that customer service was always at the bottom, because to me, an assignment guy who doesn't have a phone number in global, that's strike one, dude. And by the way, if you are an officer today, if you are one of those people that does not have a signature block, shame on you, because that tells me that you don't give a crap about anything except what you want to say. So then you're going to type up crap emails, etc. But yeah, is that trust? I completely agree. Now, on a side note, Colin Powell, I don't know if I can trust him, because he did say nuclear weapons were a complete waste, which I completely disagree with. So, yeah.
He had a pretty long career though, so he did something right.
He did, because he was holding bottles at the UN Security Council going, this is biological agent, and the Iraqis have it. And then later came out, and yeah, but this isn't about cool stuff.
So kind of shifting gears a little bit, obviously you're pretty into academia. You did your thesis a while back and you're teaching now. Is it important for a leader to read, and also what are you reading?
Okay, that's fair. I will say this. Night one of each class I teach, and these are all enlisted people, spouses, people who are getting ready to hit their 20 years, and they're like, man, I just got to check the CCAF box. By the way, being here at Stuttgart, now I teach Army, Marines, Navy. Prior had just been Navy, so now I get this whole jointness, and it's like these cultures. It's fascinating.
That's awesome.
But what I tell them is, hey guys, you know what? Your college degree, waste of time. If there's anything I could magically change is you're wasting 4 years of your time, and you're wasting how much money, God knows now these days. But when it comes down to it, you can get this education by yourself. You can get this education because at the end of the day, it's all about critical thinking. Mathematics, critical thinking. Science, critical thinking. Philosophy, critical thinking. So I will tell people, and I firmly believe this, is that education does not stop. The unhappiest parts of my life were probably the times when I stopped learning. I became so job focused. I became so, goal focused that I forgot to stop and meditate, or I forgot to stop and pray, or I forgot to stop and read. So if there's anything I will tell people is that, yes, education is important. Oh, and by the way, if the military wants to give you some free education, waste their money and go do it. Why not? Because if there's anything I have learned is it's not about what's in the books. It's about who you meet sitting next to you. It's that, man, when I was at Minot and when I was in San Antonio, I knew so many people because of teaching. I could just pick up the phone, and even here in Stuttgart, it's worked so many times. We're like, oh man, I got a problem. Oh, hey, I know that guy who works over there. Hey man, can you help me out real quick? Hey Travis, what's going on? Oh, sorry, sir. Dude, don't call me sir. But yeah, find those ways. Now, reading or learning podcasts, I'm a big podcast guy these days. But if there's any 3 books I will recommend, right now I'm reading a book, reading 2 books. One is this book. It's a fiction book on the John Franklin expedition. It's an AMC adaptation about the failed way of where everyone died trying to find the Northwest Passage. I'm also reading a book for my master's degree right now. I'm getting a master's from King's College. The Air Force is paying for it, and it's cost about 30,000 pounds.
Wow.
And there's no active duty service commitment. Raise your roof. But I'm reading a book called Orderly and Humane. The story of the post-World War II expulsion of 14 million ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe. Since I've been here in Europe, I will say that living overseas or living in an area where you're not from, you get to open your aperture. Like when I lived in North Dakota for 10 years, I got to open my aperture to like, what is it like living on the plains? If you're so focused as like what's going on in this base, you don't get to see Minot. You don't get to see that, hey, 40 miles away is Canada. Canada right here has a huge Mennonite population. I would have never known that. But here in Germany, I've learned so much, just like the things they don't teach you in history class, like that right there. We're taught that, hey, we met the Russians the Soviets at the river, and war's over, and then Korea. The things I have learned here, especially that story right there, is one of the biggest atrocities and failures of leadership, I would argue, of ethnically cleansing an entire half continent of people. And we let the Russians do it. We let the Soviets do it. Now, we can get into arguments of realism and et cetera, but a fascinating book. I will say that if there's anything I can recommend, I always tell there's 3 stories out of 3 books I recommend every time. One is called The Power of Habit, What We Do in Life and Business by Charles Duhigg. I will argue has been hugely impactful in my life. Number 2 is the Survivors Club. The first book is about how we learn, how we get into habits. So one thing I tell my students is, if you want to figure out how to make money today, figure out what the statistical trends will be 5-10 years down the road from now. Hey, I'm going to design a website today that's going to use MySpace. MySpace isn't around. So that helps them with that. The second one asks the question of, how is it that we survive? How is it a plane crashes and everyone gets out? Everyone dies except for this, one Bruce Willis-like character. outstanding book, outstanding book. Those two books together, I argue, teach you how to be an instructor. Really do. And I think that's something the Air Force really needs to look at again, is how we instruct people. From enlisted to officer corps, IDE, SDE, EPME, whatever it is, we do so bad at it. And it's not me being overly critical, but it's me just being honest. Like, we need to have some honest conversations. So yeah, kind of long-winded answer.
I appreciate that. You mentioned networking, and from your perspective, particularly at AFPC, working with all these commanders and everything, and you were obviously pretty networked, could you have done your job and as a teacher, like you talked about in Stuttgart, without being able to network?
No, not in the least bit.
Yeah.
I will say that the guy who followed me came to visit me here in Stuttgart a year into the job, and we got drunk, had a great time. I love him to death, like a brother. And he decided the same thing. He's like, I'm done, man. This place has burnt me out. The community has burnt me out. I'm coming to Germany. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So he's up at Ramstein. I'm down here at Stuttgart. We're joking that the current person, she's probably going to come over here too. And we're just going to have one big like AFPC reunion. But one thing I don't think we talk about a lot is the negatives of networking. We talk a lot about the positives of networking. We talk a lot about, yeah, you're right. I had wing commanders call me. I had generals call me. It blew my mind. I was a guy who turned down school. I did not want to go in residence because it impacted my family. And so because of that, my record showed that I didn't go to school. Therefore, I must be a pile of crap because I didn't do in residence. And I used to argue so much that our serf, everything makes us into a one-dimensional character. And that's how you get jobs. That's how you get everything. But one of the things that, like I said, we don't talk about is that negative aspect of networking, is that my first year and a half out of AFPC, I became so distrustful of anyone reaching out to me. And the guy who behind me, him and I've had some great conversations about that recently. He feels the same way. He's felt like he gets very suspicious now when people, hey man, I got a question. And he's been asking, who's my friend, who's not my friend. And what's interesting is, don't get me wrong, we should do that for one another. Number one, there should be this quid pro quo. I help you, you help me. I can scratch your back, etc. But a lot of people today don't do the back scratching for you.
It's one-sided.
Yes, completely. Yeah. And I think because of that, I have definitely, especially in the last year, taken a different approach to networking. I still love networking. I love to get out there and meet people. I will say that I'm a little bit more, I don't ask anything from anyone anymore. I really don't. Like now it's just like, I'll figure it out myself. Or, I mean, when I say that, like it's more, yeah, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I don't think a lot of people talk about the negative side of networking. And that's an awesome perspective, because you're right. A lot of people do just think about the positives and all the reaping rewards that come with that. But particularly in your situation where you did have all these high level kind of decision makings, they're like, man, Pred was awesome. And that kind of has followed you your whole way through. And you're like, Pred gets stuff done. But so now that you're out of that position, they're still seeking that.
Yes. And I'll be honest, I had a great time. Like, so my entire career has been that. I had one feedback session. My boss had told me, Pred, quote, "You are a force of nature." And I said, I am putting that in my OPR.
That is awesome line.
So, but with that, like I said, you just have to, the things that would irritate me from the networking, I guess you could say, and that would be a good article for you to write, I would argue, is, the things that would irritate me, the networking, would be, I would just be bluntly honest. How I'm interacting with you is the way I interact with everyone. Even if you're an A1C, if you're a civilian, a colonel. I have sat in a room with 2 stars, and this is exact 3 stars. General, who is now General Ray, the 4-star Global Strike Command. I mean, we had to brief his replacement here at UCOM, and the guy was an Army guy, and he was a little confused on a few things. So I looked at General Ray in a very cavalier way and said, well, sir, I think we can summarize all of this with 1, 2, and 3. And I said, that's about right, right? And that's exactly how I said it.
Uh-huh.
And my O6 is sitting next to me, and my O6 just turns his head, looks at me. He's Navy, and just kind of got this like, oh God, you're gonna get us in trouble look.
Your
But
force of nature.
yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm digressing. But what I learned out of that was I hate walking into environments and telling people, and again, another negative impact of networking is you tell them to their face, hey, your guys are saying this, or hey guys, this is broken.
Mhm.
They agree with you, but when they get in front of their boss, they become very, If there's anything I have learned also is, which kind of ties in with the leadership discussion, is when it comes to, we as officers are so focused on career. We in the Air Force have defined so much of our success off of what rank we have or our prefix indicator on our AFSC. So if it's, hey, look, I'm a commander, I'm a group commander, no one gets out and goes, hey man, I was just a staff officer. That's gonna be mine. I was just a staff officer when I got done. Woohoo, right? But unless you were a squadron commander, etc. So because of that, there's this kind of those unintended consequences. So because of that, you now have people who are so focused on, not upsetting the boss. Everything has become so politicized, but not as a left-right kind of thing, but so much of a, well, there's a professional way of telling the boss that things are not broken or they are broken. And I'm like, but sometimes you have to shock the system to really get things to wake up. And I hated that. I remember I walked into one and I had to brief, every time I go on a road show, I would brief the squadron commanders with the group commander, or sorry, without the group commander sometimes. And they would all agree with me. But then as soon as we brought in the wing commander or something like that, it was night and day, night and day.
Yeah, it sounds like a fine line to kind of balance there, because you do need to please people to a certain capacity. I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, there's all walks of life out there,
Yeah, and I'm kind of, it was funny because I'm finishing Air War College right now in correspondence, and it's my, quote, quarantine goal, unquote. And right now I'm doing the leadership applied, and we're talking about that. And to me, there's ways of telling the boss, this is effed up. Now, I use humor to to make the point of the spear less pointy. It kind of throws myself under the bus while still making the point of what's going on. I've had people argue that that's not the way you should do it or anything like that. But to me, we all have to find that one leadership thing. Like what I always like to tell people, and I still believe this too, is there's a brand. We all have a brand. It's statistically proven. I tell my students this, it is statistically proven that if the teacher knows your name, you will get a better grade in the class. Guaranteed. And it's true. When I grade, and I'll be like, who is this? I can't even remember who this is.
Yeah.
I'll sit there and go, well, now they're just a name.
Yep.
I can give them a crappy assignment. I can sit here and tell them, sorry, you're working weekends. But if you're the guy that stands out from everyone else, you're the token gay guy in the squadron. That was me. I use that as my brand and threw humor under it. Or if you're the guy who knows how to use DTS, or you're the guy who is your weapons and tactic officer that is dry as hell, then run with it, man. Like, use that to your advantage, because if there's anything I can say is we in the military live in a bubble. We really do. Living here in Germany and talking to my German friends, and we have Italian friends, Slovakian friends, we, not only do Americans live in a bubble, but inside that bubble is another bubble, and that's the military. We have no clue what it's like to get a job. We have no clue what it's like to fight for things. So like I said, we just wait for the next 3 years, get a job, etc. So we don't plan. We don't strategically plan. So if you're a young captain, you sit back and you go, well, how am I going to become a squadron commander? Okay, well, first, become a DG at SOS. Because whatever it takes to get on someone's radar, that's because no one knows how to really manage human resources. They come back, and at the end of the day, they will just be like, well, give me the easiest solution. Or they'll call someone at MAGCOM and they'll give them a spreadsheet of people who went to school. Or, well, I know this one guy because he went to weapons school. I went with him. Or I know this guy through another colonel or another lieutenant colonel. So as soon as you identify that brand, or what is it that you're made of, like, my brand in the buff was, and again, I'm an instructor EDUB and the B-52. My brand wasn't my aviation skills. my brand, no kidding, was nuclear operations. Like, to me, being an EW in the buff, that's easy, man. A monkey can do that. A monkey can be a pilot. A monkey can go to weapons school. I know that's gonna. I know the fighter bros are gonna. But yeah, you can go and do it. I get it. But at the end of the day, can you critically analyze a problem and solve that problem? So to me, that's what I did. I said, well, I need to get a brand. Well, I love nuke. And as a young kid, which was ironic because I'd always begin, I was never a fan of nuclear weapons. I was never, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll go do this. Why not? And then, yeah, by the time I left Minot, I had wing commanders asking questions about nuke policy, all these questions. And then when I went to AFPC, everyone was like, Fred, you're the nuke guy. Yeah, I was like, yeah, now I'm the human resource guy. So
now you're dual-headed.
I know, man. Hey, it's management at its best.
That leads me to another good discussion point. I know it's not kind of what we pre-did here, but with the branding, I've heard in the past being mentored, and I've kind of seen it happen, not only in other people, but in myself, as like become like a SME in one particular topic or subject, because you're not going to be a SME in everything buff. You're not going to be like even a system on a plane, like you can be an expert in like hydraulics or something, but to be an expert in every component of everything on the plane is not only impossible, it's probably a waste of your time. So do you think, and you already said that kind of helped you, but in my mentoring session, I was like, yeah, why don't you, as part of mentoring, urge people to seek out something that they enjoy, that they'll want to learn, like you with statistics or math or whatever. That's not my ball game. I don't really have a desire to do that, but it works for you. You love it. And when you love something and you're passionate about something, I think you're wanting and willing to put more time into it. And that helps you kind of further and create your brand along the way. So I totally agree with that. And other commanders in the past have told me that in mentoring sessions, like, yeah, it's a really good way to articulate an idea that I've already kind of thought about, but kind of put it into words. So I really like that topic. If you had some advice, I know we've kind of already talked about you as a captain a little bit, but if you could go back in time a little bit and be like, you know what, Pred, like, what would I have done? Or you don't have to have done anything different, but what would you have done different as a newly minted captain, kind of from a leadership perspective, either as a shop chief, flight commander, whatever, taking care of people essentially is kind of where I'm getting at.
Okay. So I purposely did, I read over your questions when you sent them to me.
Yeah.
And then I purposely like forgot about them because I wanted to think on the spot. I wanted to think like what would jump out at me. What would I tell a new captain, or what would let's answer that.
New leader. It doesn't have to be a captain.
Yeah. Let's how about this? Well, I'll give you two answers for that.
Okay.
First will be what I used to tell people. What is your priority? I think one of the biggest misnomers in America, this is America, not the military, is that we're told you can have everything. I fell for it. When I was at AFPC, I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. My first 13, 15 years in the military were all like, I can have everything. I can do this. I can help out in the community. I can be married. I can do this. I can, etc. Right? That is one of the biggest lies we have been fed. And I'm actually excited Corona is here because people are slowing down now. And actually, I've been arguing this for 5 years. If we could just slow down and see what is wrong, we'd wake up. So because no one prioritizes, the military doesn't prioritize. The military doesn't prioritize. Why? Because Congress doesn't prioritize. Congress doesn't prioritize because at the end of the day, all they give a crap about, and this sounds very realistic, you know, as we would say in international relations, but they don't prioritize because at the end of the day, it's about power and money and getting reelected. So with this deadly cycle, there has to be something that prioritizes somewhere. So that's what I'm kind of excited about Corona, is this idea of prioritizing. That comes down to you in your life as well. What we're not taught at OTS is to prioritize our life. I mean, we got the stupid resilience training, you know, I've seen so many different variations of it, but like, you know, the big 4 lifelines of life, but we're taught to, not even to balance them. We're just taught that make sure you take care of each one of them, not to prioritize them, you know. But with that, I always used to tell people, when people would call and be like, Brad, oh my God, man, like get me out of Minot. I don't know. Or I guess the other, I need out of Minot, please, or get me out of Dias. And I'd be like, oh God, Dias isn't Minot. But, or, people, they thought everyone would think the next assignment would solve their problems. Or they think that if I do this tactical maneuver, this will solve these problems. I will be open and honest. I have enjoyed going to a shrink the last year because yes, AFPC did a wallop on my mind. And talking with a shrink, I've realized that there has to come a time, and I used to say this as an assignment officer, I just never did it, is that there comes a time when you have to prioritize what is your end state. What are you going to do in the military? That's not going to solve your problems. I always used to tell people, don't solve strategic problems with tactical answers. And so because of that, in the bomber, we always start at the target and work back. So, hey, I want this effect on this building or this whatever. And then we plan, as you know, all the way back to the step desk where we all high five each other and do our weapon, our clock check. And all right, let's go fly. We walk through all of it. Yet in our own lives, we don't do that. I would argue other career fields don't do that. Military officers don't do that. I would argue I've seen senior enlisted who don't do that. Nothing is more depressing when I teach a class and a guy, sitting in there is like, I've heard this at least 24 times. Hey man, I'm getting ready to retire next year. I'm just trying to get my CCAF done. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? And he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, wait a minute, you've had 20 years to figure this out and you're almost 40 and you don't, yeah, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. Probably just get a GS job or whatever. But what I always like to tell people is that start with your desired end state. The first bomb run of life, I called it, was the military career. Are you doing 10? What is your goal? What do you want out of the military? Is your priority to see the world? Is your priority to be that technical expert of the oven on the B-52? Is your goal to be an RPA pilot so that because you love flying? Or what is it? Pick that one thing and work back from that. That includes, I want to be a colonel. I want to be a lieutenant colonel. I want to be some scumbag major for life who just flies the line. Okay, that opens up so many avenues. But what's funny also is that people don't do that for life. I argue that as a young captain, I get it, 26, 27 years old, up until 27 years old, you really never had to make a decision your entire life. You've either had a good family that has pushed you to get good grades in school, and then you're like, I love America. I'm going to join the military. I saw Top Gun. I'm going to join the Air Force. That's Navy. That's not important. They join the Air Force, right? And then they're told through ROTC what to do, OTS or whatever, do what to do. Here's your plane. Here's your career field. Now you're going to go be an OSI or maintenance officer. So they're never taught that. They're never taught to ask, what do I want to be when I'm 80 years old? Do I want to die with a fully functional family? Do I want a good, healthy body? What is it I want? Because like we say with bomb runs, you can maneuver for this threat, but now you're out of tolerances and you're never going to hit the LAR. So I would argue that that's got to be the biggest thing as a 27. Not that you need to know exactly what that is, but you need to have a general idea. Like, hey man, when I'm 80, I'd like to have been married maybe once, twice, 3 times, doesn't matter. Have kids, do this, and then it'll all come back. Moving here to Europe has made me realize that. Is like, oh man, yeah. Well, when I get out, we want to stay in Europe. Okay, well, how do I stay in Europe? Well, we got to find a job where I can do this, figure out what taxes are, figure this out. And then, where do I want to be as a 75-year-old guy? And that's kind of what I feel. I'm a little behind the power curve, but working,
No, I think that's great. Strategic with trying to solve a strategic problem with tactical mindset. And I've noticed, having mentored other people as well, that I think you do need a good mentor in the military to kind of help you with that strategic thinking, like, hey, I wish I would have done this years ago kind of thing. And being able to, especially as I'm looking at officer perspective, because obviously that's what I am. So as a lieutenant, it's like, well, yeah, what is my end state? What am I looking to get out of this? Because I've already been in 8 years, almost 5 deployments down. And it's kind of a blink, it just goes by like that. And you're like,
that is so true.
Wow, what do I want to do? I kind of know what I would like to do eventually, but you know, it's an end state. And if you're not having, I think, intermediate goals in between there, like, oh yeah, I made that one milestone or whatever. You just got to do that. Kind of like you. It's like, hey, I want to stay in Europe. I know broadly what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And I'm actually,
what is the priority? And sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
no,
Usually yell at me, but yeah, you have to make that choice. What is your prioritization? We are so afraid of, and I've realized I am that way. The military has made me so afraid to make a decision because I'm so used to getting yelled at by someone for making a, oh, Fred, you didn't do this. Okay, I get it. But once you make that prioritization, they become so much easier. Like for me, I'll be honest, I turned down an offer to go somewhere to be put as a DO I got set up because of my work at AFPC to be a commander, make 06, everything. And I had to tell the individual who, on the phone, who now made 1 star, hey man, no, I'm sorry, this isn't my priority. And when I tell people that, one of two things happens. You either get well, man, the military, yada, 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 or you'll get the other people who are like, good on you, but they're afraid themselves to make decisions, or they're just glad to see someone doing it. And because of that, like I said, it's now I sit here and go, well, if my goal is to stay in Germany or stay in Europe the rest of my career or the rest of my life, then I know if I don't want to go back to fly, I've got to make decisions in my life that will probably suck a little bit. Like, for example, coming out of UCOM, I've got it all lined up. I'm going to Africa for a year on a 365 because that was the one 365 we could never get volunteers for. And I told him, I was like, listen, I'll make a deal. If I go do this, I want to stay in Germany. Okay, no big deal. Perfect solution. And then, but once you line all that up, it's amazing how easy life is.
Yeah, that's
it's
awesome.
Just hard to, sorry.
That's, I'm reading a book now. I can never remember names of
what
books.
Do you read?
Kind of like you
and
can.
If it's Dr. Seuss, I'm going to be disappointed.
I do like Oh, the Places You Will Go. It's called The Mission, the Men and Me, Lessons from a Former Delta Force Commander. And obviously that's a little bit more extreme than what I'm doing, being an RPA pilot. Like we're talking about going up in the mountains in Montana, doing something that's never been done before. Like, how am I going to get 6 dudes over 80 to 100 miles in winter over a mountain? Dude, for tactics in Afghanistan. It's like, that's crazy.
You do the same thing every day. The det decides to go down to Tumon Bay and have a beer. Your job is to figure out how to get everyone back in the vehicle and back onto base without any alcohol. That's an achievement medal.
Exactly. But he was talking about kind of like you're talking about. It's like, what's the end state? Well, in the mission, what are we trying to do? And the whole book kind of just echoed what you're talking about. All the bureaucratic stops in the way of the man on the ground is kind of his big thing. Is it good for my mission? Is it good for me? Isn't it good for my men? Those were kind of his little pillars of what he preaches throughout the book. But if it meets those criteria, he's going to go for it. Obviously, he's like in his own little kind of world in the Delta Force thing. I don't know the bureaucracy of that, but from reading it, there's a lot of brass involved with that. And when he wanted to achieve something in his mission, how we always kind of like had to ask Dad, hey, I want to go do this, and all the stops in place to make sure it went to the institutional kind of prowess of, hey, this is kind of how we do business. And I get that. I also realize that the Air Force and the DoD as a whole in general is a huge, huge enterprise. Well, how do you manage such a large enterprise with on each individual basis and get everybody to, I'm trying to come up with the words for it, but be happy and or have things in place which makes everybody kind of on the same page, if that kind of makes sense.
Makes complete sense. and working at UCOM, I'm so glad I got some joint time. Like when I was a bio officer, I worked with the Army a lot, Army National Guard in North Dakota. So I got a little bit of a flavor of like what that's like. But here, I'm going to let you in on some inside stuff. The things I've learned in the joint world. Number one, the Army, I will argue, is the best at planning. Wow. Their manuals, I'm always impressed with the Army. They love things in quad charts. They're very like, well, the Marines always eat crayons, but like at least the Army, they're very, but at the same time, they are so rigid. They hate the Air Force approach of 80% is good enough, we'll figure it out airborne. They don't like that. Like the Army generals I've had to brief, they like it very like, they're very nitnoidy, which can be good, but can also be bad. That's number one. Number two, I have written a plan that has been approved and signed off by the SecDef. One of my coolest things. I got to name an operation thing I'm so proud of in my career. I'm done. Put that on my tombstone. But what I have learned is you always think when you go somewhere, the echelon above you knows what they're doing, or they know like there's this confidence. You think they're going to have this confidence. And what I have been surprised at within the entire time is if it's my time at the wing, if it's my time on AFPC, the equivalent of air staff, or now being at a COCOM, there's this, I don't know, I'll call it this fog of war, because I can't even put my finger on what to call it, because there's this sense of kind of this, well, either this micromanagement, but it's this micromanagement that turns into this, well, they fly the banner of we're going to delegate this down. But then no solutions ever come out. It's like, okay, hey, we got some ideas. Well, hey, can you tell us what to do up here? And it just kind of like goes back and forth. It's kind of this, I mean, it's kind of hard to describe. I wish I could really describe.
And in the book, he kind of talks about that, and he gives it that verbology, and he calls it trusting the guy on the ground. Like the whole book is, and kind of like we talked about earlier, if you're going to be an expert in something in the military period. Well, once you're a leader, I think you have to, it's Chris Little's perspective, I think you have to rely on other people more that know more about you and what you do. And the article I'm writing now is just reflections of flight command. And I kind of put shop chief in there too, because I approached flight command and shop chief kind of the same, even though they're two different things. But I knew how to, I'm good at OPRs and writing. I'm not particularly good at knowing how EPRs are formulated. I know about them, but I'm not an expert in EPR decorations and training reports, which as the leader of the Commander's Action Group as flight commander, I was responsible for all those things. Well, the team I had, and it kind of goes back to trust, is, well, I trust that my team members know how to handle those things. I have to be able to talk to them, but I'm not going to be the expert. I'm going to trust the dude on the ground, my other teammates, to kind of help fill that void, because any leadership position, you're not going to know everything about all the things. Like that's set up for failure. And it kind of goes back to trusting my individuals. And through that, it actually ended up being a pretty good flight command gig because I did that. Had I not done that and tried to micromanage a lot, which I think is kind of maybe what you were alluding to a little bit.
Yes.
And that all goes back to trust, really. Yeah, lives are at stake when you're talking about operations and stuff. So I'm thinking about it from probably a more tactical flight command level, but it can kind of work its way up, you know. So that's kind of how I articulate it.
I think that's very well said, Chris. I think that is so great example. You have issues trying to figure out EPRs. Well, first, I used to make this argument at AFPC. The whole personnel system is Sanskrit. And if you can read that language, you were the Rosetta Stone guy. That's good, because now you figured out how to get into the secret order so that you can get promoted. Yeah. It sucks. But number two, if I was in that position, what I would have argued was, well, you know what you need to do is, was this when you're back being a CISO, or when you
Yeah,
were,
I was at Offutt at the FTU.
Okay, perfect. That's right. Because I couldn't remember if you were a NAV or an EDUB all of a sudden.
I was at EDUB, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
So that's why I said CISO. But if I was in your shoes, what I would have done would have been, I would have went over to maintenance debrief, because that's where I made friends. Whereas at maintenance debrief, joshing and joking with the senior airmen, and been like, hey man, can I talk to one of your E7s or E8s real quick? Because I would make friends with them guys. And then I'd find one I would trust and be like, can you explain EPRs for me? Like, what do you guys look for when it comes to, you know, et cetera? Another thing that you talk about when it comes to trust I have learned, here's a great example, my time difference between AFPC and working at a COCOM. When I was at AFPC, it blew my mind because I was so loud. And so I didn't care what people thought of me. To me, truth is what mattered. So when they had generals come to visit to talk about the rated crisis, I'd be in the room being the one saying everything. And then the 06s or the deputy AFPC commander, no kidding, she would bring the A1 to my cube and go, "Oh, ma'am, this is Pred." And I'm sitting there holding a coffee mug, just sitting there like this, and says, "Ma'am, no one wants to do that shit." And then I get done and someone comes up to me and, "Pardon me, I know this is not PG friendly, but someone said, Pred, you can't do that." And I was like, "Why?" Because she's going to remember what I said. Because she may not remember exactly, but she's going to go, that one kid who said X because he used a curse word. And she's going to trust that because the deputy was doing the same thing. Here at UCOM, being in a COCOM, it's been different because being in a whole jointness, you learn how the services teach one another what to do. The Army is very big on rank. Holy cow, are they big on rank. They either do one or two things. We'll call it the middle, the frozen middle. The 06s and 1-stars tend to be very like, I'll brief this. I need to prove who I am. When I was at AFPC, it'd be like, Pred's a major. Let him throw himself on the cross and figure it out. In a COCOM and a joint environment, you tend to see the opposite of that. You tend to see this, hey, we're going to go brief the 3-star. Do you have your slides ready? Well, you're not briefing. I am now. So it's like you're now telling them. Now, what's the first thing that comes out to you? That is, you don't trust me? You don't trust me to say what needs to be said? And when you do that, it is the most corrosive thing in an institution is the lack of trust. And if you can't, and how you message that. When I was a bio officer, and again, maybe this is the second proudest accomplishment of my life. When I was a bio officer, the first boss I had was a good boss. He taught me a lot. He taught me what not to do, told me what to do. But I remember when I got to be the boss, the second half of my tour there, I remember pulling in the NCOs and I said, "Listen, what I want is I want a pyramid for this office." I said, "But what I want is this pyramid to be interchangeable." I said, so for example, if we have to go do an emergency response, maybe it's me that puts on the mask and walks into the zone with the A1C. And then guess what? The senior airman I replaced can go talk to the wing commander. It does two things. Number one, to me, it speaks volumes to the guys that you're telling, hey, I'm going to tell you to put on this mask that you say that you've inspected, and you're going to walk into that misery cloud, and you're going to take care of that, right? So you tell them that, like, I'm going to go do this. That tells them, wow, this guy who gets paid more than me, who went to college, who, yeah, has some privilege, I guess you could say, he's willing to do this so that I don't. In exchange, he's going to have me go brief the wing commander or go brief the group commander on what's going on. Yeah. I will say that is one of the biggest things that we don't do enough of with our NCOs, definitely, and our and probably our CGOs, is that we don't let them brief. We let them, like, when hey, General so-and-so is coming to visit, tell them about the kitchen, the galley, and the RC-135. Well, sir, this is the refrigerator, and this is the where the Hot Pockets go.
We did have all those things.
Exactly. We didn't. We had a crappy oven, and but that's all we let them do. We don't, unless they go to weapons school, because that's, you learn how to brief. Yeah. But we don't let them fail. We're so afraid of letting people fail. Things don't have to be perfect. They really don't. But if there's anything I would definitely, if I could go back and do things over in my career, would be that. I let people do a lot of briefing, try to get them to be energetic. The second thing, if I could do it all over again, and we're not playing philosophical, well, if you change this, this is going to change, and, weird Hollywood
butterfly effect or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. But if I could change anything, I would have become a RASPAS officer, or now what we call FAOs, a Foreign Affairs officer. That has been, I just never knew it existed. And if I knew that was my end state in the military, I would have done things so drastically different.
Actually, my commander, when I was at LT, he's like, what degree do you have? And I was like, international studies. And he's like, you ever heard of PAS? And I'm like, no, I don't know what that is. but it
Sir,
kind
is
of,
that an air refueling line somewhere? Like you make it an
but
aviation
just that
manual?
one question, you know, it's like this huge thing that's out. PAS is one of many, many things, as
Yeah.
you just said, is out there. You're not going to know unless you kind of know who to talk to, or unless you've been mentored about those things.
Because
So,
again, it's who you know, and kind of one of the positives and negatives of the system.
mhm, yeah.
But to me, I thought again, I misprioritized, and to me, I said I wanted to get this close to the action as possible. I interpreted action as I wanted to be a C-17 driver. I wanted to rescue. No kidding. I wrote on my second UFT application.
Mhm.
I translated. Now I went to AFPC and I translated what that means. I wrote, I want to be a C-17 helo person. Rescue. I put rescue.
Uh,
Translated, as I learned being on the board, I'm pretty much telling them I'm aiming for the bottom of the barrel. So, don't pick me.
I see. I see. Wow.
I should have put, I want to be an F-22 driver and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I mean, because I thought that's what being in the action was. Now that I'm older and wiser, I could say that to me, action isn't what it's a construct. We put a construct on life, and that construct is fed by people, like you said, your mentor.
Mhm.
I will argue you should have two mentors, a mentor that can, or maybe, how about a shepherd? I don't want to use the term mentor. One should be a shepherd that can get you through the rated world or get you through the maintainer world.
Mhm.
But then your true mentor should be a mentor for life, not just the military. I would argue, is this your minister? Is this someone you trust with every facet of your life?
That's a good perspective. Yeah.
And your shepherd is the one that gets you through. Hey, Brad, did you get your IDE done in residence? Oh, hey, Chris, you want to be a deck commander? That's it? Okay, cool, man. You're wasting your time. Don't go worry about going to IDE in residence. Oh, you don't want to be an 06? Don't waste your time with just make 05. Don't do Air War College in correspondence. Don't do this. Don't do this. And now you're freeing up time in that space, right?
Mhm.
But if you don't prioritize everything else in life, then the rest of it's kind of a waste of time.
That's
God, I'm
good. Yeah.
giving you nuggets here for articles. This is copyright Predco.
Yeah, articles are kind of a way that I've just kind of expressed what I've learned throughout my career. Hopefully, I don't know whatever I'm going to do with it, but other than
I guess
share it.
Chris,
But
that's a great question. Have your guests ever asked you that? Like, what is your desired end state in the military? Do the people who listen to this know what your desired end state in the military is?
no, not really. I kind of have a idea.
Okay. Is it more this? Is it more? I used to, when I would do my road shows, I'd be like, "Oh, are you playing cards? You don't want anyone to know?" Like,
no, it's not that.
Okay.
I just growing up an only child, I really kind of only had to lead myself for the first 20-ish years of my life. So I come from that perspective. Leadership kind of came a little later to me, but and it's also in the article I'm kind of writing. But you can't pour from an empty cup, like especially as a leader. Like you can't give, because leaders expected to give and give and give and give.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have your cup filled first, how are you expecting other people to kind of be able to metaphorically drink out of that cup, if you will? So I came from that perspective growing up, like, how am I going to fill my cup? Well, later on in life, I've kind of switched gears. How can I help people? Kind of like you, like when I first met you, you're just super people oriented. Even at AFPC, all the bombs are going off. Like you were stressed out. It's like, you still took time for this nobody, like almost captain dude trying to go to this UFT board, dime a dozen. You were actually like willing to help. And that's kind of the perspective I've done is how can I make leaders better for tomorrow? And I feel from Chris Little's perspective, at least the higher up in rank you go, I feel like the more impact you can have on people. I know it gets skewed a little bit more and there's a little more politics. So that's kind of my end goal, is kind of to see how far I can get. And I kind of come from the perspective of what's meant to be is meant to be. But along the way, I always want to help people, mentor people, do the right thing, be, the weapons school mantra is kind of cliche, but be humble, approachable, and knowledgeable. And I think that does I know it sounds corny, but I mean, I think the humble piece is just super overlooked sometime, as well as having empathy and be able to relate to other people, particularly from like an officer to an enlisted perspective as well.
Let me challenge your word choice.
Mhm.
Again, I love living in these philosophical worlds of like thought and stuff like this.
Mhm.
Instead of humble, the word I like to use is vulnerable.
Yeah, that's true
The
too.
best leaders are the ones that are, to me, are vulnerable. The ones that you realize have
Mhm.
these stains, if you will, or the things that, you know, hey man, I failed the check ride. Oh, really? No shit.
Mhm.
To me, you sit back and go, wow, okay, that's cool. This person is just not this. We put this Victorian like curtain around us that we don't want um, people to break through. And so because of that, then there's this, we'll call it level 1 trust. Then there's
Mhm.
level 2 trust, level 3. You want that higher level of trust. Like, great example. The only reason I helped out so many people is because of 2 reasons. They're all philosophical. Number
Mhm.
1 is I love underdogs. I love when people call, and even today, I literally just got done writing a character reference for a guy I knew only for 6 months who
Mhm.
was facing drug charges. Because, hey, guess what? I was willing to listen to the story. Come to find out, he suffers from PTSD, got into the RPA world, and no one was there to help him. And I sit there and go, no one helped him, and now his life is ruined. And this wasn't one of those things because, you know, so to me, I sit there, if someone calls and they go, well, hey man, Pred, you know, my wing is going to push this guy over here, yada, yada, yada. Story sounds familiar. And so to me, I sit there and go, all right, well, let's help this guy get across the line because no one's willing to help him out. He needs to have someone help him out.
Mhm.
So when people would call, my standing order to myself was I would let them complain literally for 10 minutes. If they
Mhm.
want, I mean, in first 10 minutes was talking. It was, hey man, how you doing? And I would see who really gave a crap about what my life was like. And
Uh-huh.
then if they did, we would talk longer than 10 minutes. And I'd be
Yeah.
like, dude, it's been 25 minutes. Oh crap, it's my fault. But the
Yeah.
ones who I could tell were only just about them or, you know, etc. 10 minutes, I'd be like, okay, dude, what do you want?
Yeah.
Like, and I would ask them that. I'd be like, what's your end state? And
Mhm.
they'd be like, I said, before you do that, you know, you can't answer the rest of these questions.
Mhm.
Also, another thing I've learned with that is, and again, because if you're balanced or if you're more of this analytical thinker, you can answer questions like the giving thing.
Mhm.
I agree with that. There's a point up to a point where you can give, but you got to know when to say no.
Mhm.
And to me, I did that triage. Every phone call was like, this guy, yes. Oh, this guy helped me in the past. Not a douche. I can help him.
Yeah.
This one, dude, weapons school graduate is in the HPO. Nope, dude, give a call to someone else. I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And so because of that, you really get to see how just where your philosophical take is. Like if you're Christian, Buddhist, whatever, and you
Mhm.
sit back and you say that, you know, or a Republican, liberal, whatever you are, I want people to be this way, then live that way.
Mhm.
To me, giving back is that way. I think I have done moderately successful in my life. I have a moral obligation to
Mhm.
help those people who are below me.
Yeah.
We get it in our minds, and we're seeing it today with Corona.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, hey, I've made it. Screw everyone else. That's my biggest problem with Ayn Rand
Mhm.
and objectivism is that there has to be a time when you stop and say, I can give, not everything, not
Mhm.
even 50%. Maybe it's 10%. That may sound familiar, but yeah, you have to. You're morally obligated because if you don't, the system is going to collapse in on itself. Whatever that system is, we're seeing it in the military. No one ever gave back that 10%. So
Mhm.
because of that 10%, people are like, screw this. I'd rather go be a furloughed airline pilot for FedEx during the middle of Corona than putting up with this crap.
Yeah. I mean, that's good perspective. I also kind of what we've been talking about, servant leadership is kind of, you know, it's been a buzzword since Robert Greenleaf in the 70s. Actually, I'm about halfway through his essay now, and I never really, I guess, knew how to articulate my leadership style. I'm not saying it's 100% my leadership style, but I feel like, and what's worked for me in the past is if you serve others, kind of like you have in the past as well, everything else kind of just falls into place. If you're taking care of people, for instance, if you're a commander, if you can't take care of people, like that's your job. working with AFPC to help take care of people, you know, stuff like that. But have you read it at all?
No.
Oh, okay. He goes back to this guy, it's character. I would argue read it. It's only like 24 pages. You can Google it. I printed up the PDF.
Who was it again? Greenleaf?
Robert Greenleaf. And it's titled, I can't remember, but just Robert Greenleaf, Servant Leader. Super interesting. He starts out with a old reference from the kind of the Greek times or whatever about this person's out on a journey, and his name's Leo, but he has this servant that follows him everywhere. And without this servant, the servant had to go do something, and then the whole trek kind of just fell apart thereafter. Kind of like what you were talking about with that second book that you were reading. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, The Survivors Club.
Yeah. So he went on this trek. His servant was there helping him the whole time. Turns out the servant leader was the one kind of running the whole thing anyway. But moral of the story is, I feel if you serve others, no matter, and don't really think about the, hey, I want to make school or IDE or whatever, I feel like all that will come eventually if that's what you want. But it has to genuinely come from a good place. Like, I want to serve other people. And I think there's the intent part of, is it genuine or not? And I could tell when I first met you, I was like, oh, he's a genuine dude. He'll talk with me 15 minutes on the phone. And I've had the same with some of my commanders too. I'm like, when I became the CAG flight commander at the FTU, it's the second largest squadron in the Air Force, 672 people. Wow. That's a lot of people. And my commander at the time didn't really know him. To get there, he had to have been doing something right to begin with. So there's that. But he talked with me for an hour and a half out of his time of 672 people. And I could tell by his actions that it was a genuine, like, hey, I'm here to help you kind of thing. And that one little instance, which he might not even remember, but I remember, I think those are some of the most impactful things in an Air Force career, is the things people kind of take for granted, if you will, just these little impactful things. And it kind of goes back to not just trust, I think, but to time as well. Like, as a commander, let's say, or AFPC, your limiting resource is time. Like, that is the most valuable resource I think that you can give to somebody in those particular.
It is that you think time is the most valuable resource on this planet.
Mm-hmm. So as a servant leader, yeah, your time's going to be a lot differently managed as a flight commander or shop chief as it is a commander or DO. I get that. But at the same time, your actions as a servant leader, which is the perspective I kind of like to look at it through. And I suggest you read that article as well. There's tons of good points in there. That's a whole nother discussion. But if it comes from a genuine perspective of, hey, I want to help other people, then I think at the end of the day, hey, I did what I could to serve others, from the moral compass you were kind of talking about, and able to, everything else is just kind of secondary at that point. It's like, yeah, school, if that comes, sure, that'd be great, you know?
Yep.
But serving other people is kind of, I think, I found my footing, I think, in the Air Force on that perspective. And I'll stay in as long as I can for whatever position I can be in. Good old bloom where you're planted kind of thing.
That's right.
Which is super true. And take the jobs people don't want to do. I found that to be pretty beneficial as well.
Oh, and you keep people from getting fired. And it's funny. You just made me think of, and again, because this is more of a philosophical, like, if there's anything I could recommend for you to look into, I didn't know about this until I started my new master's a year ago. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of constructivism?
I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
Okay. Constructivism is this idea that scroll out. I've always said this for the longest time, but I found the avenue to explain everything. Mm-hmm. Scroll out and see the construct, i.e. the process and values that are applied to everything. So a great example, in the international relations world, we talk about, well, why is it that it's okay to do X? Or why is it okay that's this? So the problems that you just said it's interesting because you're right. Time is the most valuable resource. So because of that, you have to ask yourself, okay, well, why is it if people are complaining, because again, this generation, they're battling out the Z post, whoever's after the millennials. I can't think of what they're called.
I lost track.
I lost track too. But they're realizing that, again, they value experience. They value, because they're so lonely, they value this connection. So to them, I'm a 26, 27-year-old captain, or even 30, I'm part of that generation. I used to say this at AFPC. To them, they go, well, wait a minute, my boss doesn't even know my name. Well, screw this. I'm going to get out and go open up a surfboard shop in, North Dakota, of all places. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what is that construct? First, you have to look at the construct as the Air Force. How is it we define values? What is it that we find value in? Well, we find value in rank. Rank gives us money. Rank gives us power, because power, we're all told we want to be squadron commanders because we can be the boss. You get to make the decisions. We're fed this because at the end of the day, the first 16 years of our career, we don't get to make decisions. Ultimately, there's someone above us. And we're fed this line that when you get to this position, you'll get to be the boss. But then when you get there, you find out, well, crap, I'm running into the same problem I had when I was a flight commander. Someone's nano managing from up above. So the construct to me, you don't solve problems by the symptoms. You have to solve the problem of the construct. Where are the constructural problems? So you have to ask yourself, well, where's the problems at? Okay. Well, number one is my commander doesn't have time. Okay. Well, what's your commander doing? Well, my commander does this, this, and this. Okay. Well, 90% of everything you just described to me is the director of operations job.
Yeah.
He's being the DO, or he or she's being the DO. So your DO is not the people person. But then strangely enough, some communities, the deputies are the ones who do assignments. They didn't know that. So then you run into this. You're not talking to the OG. You're talking to the deputy OG who does all the assignment and wheeling and dealing. So because of that, the deputies are now doing people person stuff, because the commander has to sit through the scheduling meeting every Wednesday. Hey guys, what's the flight schedule look like this week? That's something I've never understood. It's like, why is he in here? His job should be literally just go, someone give me the report real quick. DO, answer questions. That's it. Let's move on. So because of this, something I used to say in Global Strike Command, there's management, there's micromanagement, there's nano management, and then there's pico management. Okay?
Pico. I've never heard of that.
Pico management, right? Pico management is when your 4-star is in your chili.
Okay.
The bomber guy who got fired for penises in the sky, he was fired by General Ray, the 4-star. That's the gouge I've gotten from everyone. And you sit there and go, why did a 4-star make that decision? Ultimately make that decision. I'm not, I like General Ray, good dude. But when you start nano managing and pulling things up like that, we have so centralized everything. Remember, we have more generals today than we had in the past. Yet we have one of the smallest air forces we've ever had. So you ask yourself, is because of all this nano management, what does it lead to? It leads to people who don't have time to do the things that what squadron commanders are doing. I mean, one of the great things the Army does, love or hate the Army and the Marine Corps, as an 03, they are real commanders.
Yeah.
A company grade commander is, they're on, don't tell an Army person this, G-series orders, because they hate that phrase. But as a captain, yeah, they're the ones who are making UC&J decisions. They're the ones signing for inventories. Hey, man, when I was a flight commander, I had to worry about someone making sure they were at a PT test and making sure, the stuff I had
it's
to
just
worry
so
about.
different. Yeah, like,
Yes.
flight commander is a rated guy, is the first real leadership opportunity. And even then, sometimes it might just be on paper or whatever.
Yeah.
But
And so what I will do is I'll go back to, and I'll challenge you, Chris, on what you said. You said something a little bit ago about, you said the higher I get in the construct or the structure, you said that we tend to have this feeling that we have a greater impact. Question one you have to ask yourself is, what is the impact I desire? And where on the scale of 0 to 10 is that impact? I would say one of the most impactful things I've ever done in my career is when I got called by, this was the second deployment I went on halfway through the tour, where I stayed home, and the other squadron commander from the squadron called and said, Fred, one of the guys in your squadron, I need to talk to you. he is checking himself into mental health, like going downtown and going to the crazy bin. He asked for you by name to get him to the hospital. And I sat there and was like, wow. Probably one of the more surreal things in my life, but it was one of those things that, to me, I had a huge impact on that guy's life because he told me later that no one had that time to sit there and just talk to him. And he's alive, battled through all of his depression. He's got 2 kids. He lives off the grid now, God bless him. But again, we get so focused on what is that impact? Well, I need to be president. No, you don't. Is the impact you desire saving someone or something, or not even saving that person? Is the impact you desire giving €1 to a homeless guy I saw at one of the train stations yesterday? Because I'm telling everyone we need to be helping out right now. People find that one way, and I realized, this €1 might do something that that is unmeasurable by quantitative measurements, but in all honesty is making an impact. Yeah. And so I think if you start there, then you can come back and now go, I can say the biggest impacts I've had in my life is I took something that was so uncool, i.e. nuclear operations, and I made it cool and I made it fun at Minot. Like,
that's hard to do.
It is extremely hard to do. And like, and to me, that's impact. Impact. I mean, you have to define it. Again, it's not about what the weapons school guys think. And it is, as I told my shrink about 4 months ago, I said, nothing is more anxiety ridden or nothing is scarier than having to stand out by yourself and go, I am moral certain to know this is the answer, or I know that this is what's right. When everyone else around you is saying, no, that's not cool, or this. And it's and the word you used earlier, not generous. Sorry, I got German words flowing through my head.
That's okay.
Genuine, being genuine.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary as hell. But I think if you do that, though, you will get so much more rewarding out of life. I think I think that's where, I know that sounds very beatnik, hippie, but like in the military, we're told this is what brings you success. And then in in America, we're told this is what brings you success. And in the West, and then in the East, or whatever. But if you don't stop and ask those questions, you won't have a fulfilled life. I know that sounds crazy. Yeah. And same thing with your career, yes.
Yeah, and that's why if I seek out, hey, I want to help people through servant leadership, I'm going to do that until I've exhausted all the resources for how long I can stay in or whatever,
24 years if you're an Iron Major, and what is it now, 26? Or
I would like to make it past Major for sure.
Hi-oh.
Yeah, so anyway, Pred, I really appreciate your time today. I think we're at like an hour and some change here, just having fun, just talking philosophical things.
Dude, I got so much. I get so excited when I get to talk about stuff like this. Like, so I appreciate your time. I didn't mean to take an hour 30 of your time away from your Zooming time with your family. And
I just said 30 minutes because I realize people are busy and whatnot, but
because you're thinking, this is a bomb and this guy sucks. Oh, hey, sorry, the apartment here's on fire. I gotta go, Clay.
Yeah. All right, Pred. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. If you need anything, let me know.